For many brethren, John Kline has been little more than a storybook character, a mythical brethren leader from the past, the middleman, who ministered to both sides during the Civil War. Among those brethren heroes lifted up by Andy and Terry Murray. They may have learned at some point that he was shot and killed for his beliefs and that he rode on a horse named Nell.
I knew that he was shot, martyred, and that he rode on horseback.
But for some 1,500 people who participated in the celebration marking his 200th birthday, John Kline became more than the subject of a children's book or a folk song. He became known as one of the most important leaders of Brethren church history.
Well, John Kline was, in my estimation, the most beloved leader of the church, really for all time, and he was so significant because of his concern for unity in the church.
The celebration of John Kline's life and ministry was planned for more than a year and hosted by Broadway, Virginia's Linville Creek Church of the Brethren, the home congregation of John Kline, and attended by people from all over the nation, by members not only of the Church of the Brethren, but also the Brethren Church, headquartered in Ashland, Ohio, and the Old Order Brethren, who before the 1880s were all part of the German Baptist Brethren, and who also claimed John Kline as part of their heritage. Participants in the three-day celebration learned very quickly that Elder John Kline was a multifaceted person. That came through in children's activities, the junior high events, the dozens of scholarly lectures that were presented, the reenactments by well-informed tour guides who hosted different events, even an original play that was part of a dinner theater. All pointed to a man who, while a minister, a physician, and community leader, was engaged in a constant struggle on behalf of church unity during the Civil War.
At literal risk of his life, he worked to keep the church united, and it is literally true that he lost his life because of the repeated trips to the north, which led the local hotheads to consider him a northern spy as well as sympathizer. So both friends and foes were telling him that he was risking his life. He knew it. But because of his concern for the unity of the church, he persisted and paid for it.
John Kline was a short man with long white hair and kind blue eyes. John lived on a farm near Linville Creek a long time ago. Yes, a long time ago.
Children participating in the celebration learned quickly how many aspects there were of John Kline's life. Sporting their name tags carved in the shape of Kline's horse Nell, they learned that John Kline adamantly refused to allow his photograph to be taken for fear of drawing too much attention to himself. They learned about the herbs and plants John Kline used to heal people.
It feels like towels. Is it really soft? Well, if you had a cut across you, this is what they would lay on you. Do you know what it did? It stopped the bleeding. No, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. So it's probably better than eye Band-Aids, isn't it?
Later, children made maps detailing the estimated 100,000 miles John Kline rode on horseback while on evangelism tours into West Virginia and as Annual Conference Moderator from 1861 to 1864. The nearby Beaver Creek congregation, which hosted the 1861 annual meeting, displayed artifacts from that gathering.
This from the 1861 annual meeting, the list of what everyone brought for food. Cucumber pickles were brought by Daniel Thomas, 30 dozen. Daniel Sanger brought 60 dozen. Sister Bird brought 10 dozen. David Zirkle, 100 dozen cucumber pickles. And then it just continues on.
Junior high youth, as part of a scavenger hunt around the Linville Creek Church grounds, uncovered details about that annual meeting.
There were so many crowds, it was about 3,000 to 5,000 people, that the other churches in the town had to open up so they could house them all.
They also learned about John Kline's imprisonment in Harrisonburg for opposing the secession by the Virginia government from the Union. They carried on Kline's concern for those in need by assembling commemorative Kline care kits for persons in Bosnia and other places of need.
He's a doctor, and we put like soap and hairbrushes and he cared for other people because he went and got supplies like medicine and different things like that.
If he were still around, he probably would have done that, and he probably helped with a lot of things on that idea. He'd have enjoyed helping people, like kids, and just making kits like that for them.
John Kline was not only a wonderful counselor, an evangelist, of course well known for his thousands of miles of itinerant ministry, but he was also very progressive in his own way. He was a community leader. He gave land for the first school of higher education here. He helped to get a railroad come in here. He was known as a progressive leader.
His special talent was in speaking in the vernacular. That is, he was able to talk in simple, straightforward language and communicate with his congregation. I think he had a real gift, a real knack for picking examples from the natural world that everybody could relate to.
He had that love for the church and just this gift for friendship. I was just comparing that trait with him with M.R. Ziegler, that his obvious love and care and friendship for people just won him one response.
Among the difficulties he faced was the issue of slavery.
A Brethren attitude on slavery in the early 19th century was that they were opposed to slavery. That made them not quite unique, but certainly the Brethren were one of the few groups in the South that opposed slavery. People could not be Brethren; they could not be admitted to membership generally if they held slaves. The reasons for opposing slavery were pretty simple. They believed that slaves were humans, that slaves had a soul, and they believed that it was wrong to traffic in men's souls, to buy a man's soul. That was how they put it.
Many of the scholarly presentations dealt with the issues facing John Kline's 19th century church, things like slavery, peacemaking efforts, his missionary ventures to West Virginia, the impact of the Civil War on Brethren of the day. A Sunday morning worship service reminiscent of the look and feel of worship in John Kline's day allowed those gathered to revisit their faith history, as did a Sunday afternoon outdoor baptism of several members of the Linville Creek congregation. The baptisms took place near the same spot where John Kline baptized several hundred people during his ministry days. The preliminary bicentennial event was a heritage horseback ride to congregations Kline visited in West Virginia. Riders commemorated his missionary spirit and extensive ministry to the West Virginia churches and revitalized this memory in the congregations of the area. In addition, exhibits at the 19th century home of John Kline and at the Tunker House, which was an early meeting house for members of the Linville Creek congregation, complete with hinged walls to open up the main room for large gatherings, brought 20th century visitors face to face with life in the 19th century.
It was a way to learn how they lived, what were the issues they faced, and how did they address them to make life more livable.
This is the house that John and Anna Kline lived in for most of their married life. John was
One of the
born in
personal issues John
1797.
Kline faced, in addition to slavery, church unity, and new medical practices, was the condition of his wife, Anna. Guides at the former John Kline home described how she suffered from mental illness to the point of needing constant care.
John Kline puts in his diary, Dr. Newham is at my house today. We start my new electromagnetic machine and give Anna an electric shock in the hope of its revitalizing her enfeebled nerves. Dr. Newham regards her case as not being out of the reach of relief by a course of protracted and judiciously applied medical treatment. So two things in that. One is that this was maybe one of the early forms of the electroshock treatment that we now know is used for severe mental illness. And then this last sentence, it's a real poignant statement of saying, you know, that he was hoping against hope, that the doctor knew that she was going to get better.
However, the shock treatment was unsuccessful.
In October of 1850, the census was done. This is a copy of the census report. John's name's on here, Anna's name's on here. As you go across and follow Anna's over, you see where it says a female unable to read and write. And then in the last column where it gives a sort of a place for comments, it says insane.
Throughout the weekend, aspects surfaced of John Kline's life and witness, which even those familiar with him discovered anew.
I learned about the way he had compassion for people who wanted to start a farm and didn't have enough money to buy it, so he loaned them money interest-free. I learned about his concern for getting exemption from being inducted into or drafted into the Army during the Civil War. Got the exemption for the Mennonites and the Dunkers, and paid many of those exemptions by himself. $500 in the middle 1800s per person, plus 2% of property value. That's a phenomenal amount. He was not only a fundraiser, but he was the benefactor of that.
But it was that intense generosity and his commitment to meeting the medical and spiritual needs of people throughout the church on both sides of the Civil War battle lines that angered some of his neighbors. Participants in the Bicentennial celebration relived John Kline's final days through a trip to the marker erected near the spot where John Kline was murdered 2 days short of his 67th birthday. Others took horseback rides along his final path, stopping at a house similar to one where John Kline visited just a few hours before his death.
There was a lot of tension in the area before and during the Civil War. Elder John Kline traveled this country in the midst of this tension, guided by a passion to address the needs of his neighbors, whether for illness and injury, or for household needs, or for spiritual assurance.
While he was at the Imswaller home, he repaired their clock. It was while he was engaged on the clock that a squad of young cavalrymen, seeing Nell tied near the yard gate, drew up and made inquiry for him. He promptly appeared in the door. Their spokesman wanted to know where he was going from. His answer was open and fearless. "As soon as I get done fixing the clock, I'm going to strike right across the ridge for home," making a gesture with his hand. The soldiers turned and rode off down the road, and he returned the clock and finished the job. The actions of the uncouth young rebels alarmed the members of the family, and they were not slack in expressing their grave fears for his safety to start home again, and urged him to stay with them. Their fears to him seemed misplaced, for he had always lived above board. So to the fearing hearts of the pleading family he quoted the abiding words, which he had been saying to others when the subject of his danger came up. "They can only kill the body, but they cannot kill the soul." Then biting all of them with a smiling farewell, he went out to Nell, untied her bridle ring, got onto the saddle, and rode down the road, with Nell's homeward-bound feet moving briskly, carrying her calm master out of sight of the anxious eyes watching behind at the Imswaller house.
The details of Brother Kline's fateful day are sketchy. We presume that he visited the Philip Imswaller home. His assassins, who considered him a northern sympathizer, learned of his travels and set an ambush on this then wooded ridge where two roads intersected. One shot brought him down from his faithful horse, Nell. A second shot at close range ended his life.
There were three small boys playing down by the mill. They heard the shots. They ran back and said that they'd heard shots. The people didn't believe them, but they did send a rider up to look, and when he came up, he found the body. He notified Kline's relative, and they brought a wagon and took the body back to his home then.
Those who found Kline's body noted that a smile graced his face. Perhaps this was the mark of assurance to those who were concerned about the threats on his life. They can only kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. No one was ever brought to trial for his murder, although several names were known as assumed conspirators. John Kline would not have wanted revenge on his assassins. Rather, he would have encouraged patience and forgiveness and diligence in working for their salvation.
John Kline became better known for how he died than the many things he accomplished during his life. The sacrifice he paid for his beliefs was retold in several ways, including a puppet play produced by the Harrisonburg Church of the Brethren youth group.
I can't believe he's gone. We will miss him so.
The elders preached a fine funeral for it all. My heart was warm in spite of the hurt.
And by an original play presented 3 times during the weekend celebration as part of a dinner theater.
Tell me something. Would you allow me to place myself in such jeopardy? Or me, Dot?
Well, that depends. I might stand in your way. I will not stand in God's.
Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. Perhaps you can look at it that way, Dot.
Perhaps. And if the Apostle Paul would have looked at it that way, my dear, he would have stayed home and saved us all this trouble of spreading the word of God. Because there would be no word to spread.
Yet the bicentennial event was focused more on the life of John Kline than on his death.
John Kline is a figure, I think, that really speaks to all of us of some of the important truths, commitments of our brethren faith. You know, his non-resistance, his view of slavery, his commitment to unity in the church, and his willingness to go the extra mile, literally, for the evangelism work, and his desire to see the brethren maintain a unity, but also a commitment to expanding the brethren faith into new areas. So again, some truths that I think are important for all of us as brethren to keep in mind.
John Kline is a gift to us as a congregation. We wanted to make it a gift to others that they can share in our joy. It's not a Linville Creek project. John Kline is much larger than Linville Creek, much larger than the Shenandoah District. John Kline has visions that have impacted the denomination for years. It's interesting that this year is the annual conference is on the West Coast in Long Beach, California. I don't remember which annual meeting it was, but John Kline had proposed to the standing committee that they extend missionary efforts to the West Coast. It was too forward-reaching for them at the time, so they tabled it, and it stayed tabled for years. But this year, with the annual meeting being there, and with the struggle in the denomination for the redesign, recognizing John Kline in his bicentennial year brings a spirit of affirmation and promise that I think is the greatest gift we can give to the denomination.